So, hello. This is my name is Drew Kopp, and this is the Turning Toward Being podcast for the journal called the Journal of Ontological Inquiry in Education. And and today, Carolyn White and Kurt Hill and I are going to be speaking with Chip Souba, who is a former dean and current professor of surgery at the Geisel School of Medicine in Dartmouth. And so, Chip, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And one of the things what we're interested in is looking at the role of ontological inquiry in the professional lives of the people that we're speaking to. And so we're just interested in a wide-ranging conversation about your own encounter with ontological inquiry, its impact on your professional life, and the the things that have opened up for you, and the things that have perhaps been challenging in the process of engaging in the interplay between what we would call the traditional forms of education and practice, and what ontological inquiry challenges us to be in the face of accomplishing things in our life. So with that, do you want to Chip, I want to just say, is there anything you could tell us a little bit about your biography, and what's your story?
Nothing particularly interesting. I was born and raised in Caracas, Venezuela. So I lived there till I was 15. My dad was there on business. So I speak Spanish fluently, and I love Latino food and music. I'm very comfortable with that. But let's see. Other than that, I've been kind of at least if you look in, I guess, in academic circles, particularly in academic circles in medicine, my career was not especially unique in that I went through my clinical training and then did research and the kinds of things that are necessary to get promoted and all of that sort of stuff. And so I played the game. I think you have to play the game. It's just a matter of what rules are you going to use when you play the game. And I've been in academia my whole life. I mean, I enjoy academia. I like the young people. I like the sort of cutting edge nature of the things that we do.
So what, go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Chip, what was your your entry point into, or introduction into, kind of the world of ontological inquiry? How did that come about, given your background in academia?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was around 2000. I had just I've always been interested in it, but the terms ontology and inquiry and phenomenology and that sort of stuff, I started reading about those things at about 2000, and I got very interested in some Heidegger stuff, and that was probably a turning point. I had just taken a job that was a real challenge with financial issues and merger issues and all that kind of stuff. And so the material was useful in that it provided me with a kind of a different way of looking at the world. And I think that's our job here, is to continuously challenge the way that we see the world. It's so easy to get stuck in your usual ways of speaking and acting that
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I think you all do.
Yes.
That sort of, I started writing about that in related issues in Carolyn and I took a couple of courses together, and I started sort of thinking about how might this material relate to being a physician.
Yeah.
And I thought there was some applicability there. And so, I started thinking about it and writing a little bit about it and teaching about it. And I would have to say that after a number of years, I discovered that this was my sort of primary interest, and that the administrative stuff was getting in the way.
I'd like to say something to Chip about what you just said. That notion of taking on a new responsibility and having it be incredibly challenging was exactly the same crossroad that I experienced before I got involved with ontological inquiry. I was looking for how can I be effective in an environment that seemed to not allow for that, right? And I came to Rutgers as a chair of a department, and it was like I was hitting my head against a brick wall. And so it was a few years later when I met you, I think for the first time, maybe was at, when at the medical school there at Dartmouth. And it made such a profound difference for me because I was living in a world of ontological inquiry is providing me access to something, but at the same time, I was kind of schizophrenic, like it's weird, and I'm not sure I want to tell anybody that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And so to be able to go to the Dartmouth Medical School and take a course that you were co-leading, right, was just such a boost to my, I guess, courage to go against the grain, right? And then I discovered as I did that there's a lot that you encounter when you go against the grain that you can't anticipate, right? And so while I haven't given up my commitment to ontological inquiry by any means, I have become a little wiser about some of the things that are awaiting one on the path. I guess I'll say it like that, right? And so just thank you for your presence in my life has been significant, is what I'm saying.
Well, thank you. That's nice of you to say. I experienced the same sort of pushback, and it's not personal. It's just that there's a language that we use and get accustomed to that is not familiar to other people, and I'm where I see that so clearly is and I don't see patients anymore, but the language of medicine is like the language of ontological inquiry. It's not familiar to most people, and so I was always very clear with the students. I think that you need to recognize that you're seeing a patient who, there's a power differential by virtue of the fact that they're sick, but there's also power differential by virtue of the fact that they don't know what you're talking about. So you have to use a language that they can access, and it was really it's always a challenge to sort of introduce some of the new language to people who might be interested in pursuing this field. I work with several medical centers or medical around the country, and there, it's usually because somebody like you, Caroline, who took a course or heard something, that we get engaged. But most places are not especially interested in a full-fledged course on ontological inquiry, or even on what does it mean to be a doctor. That's the approach I use with our people, because they can kind of relate to that. And as you and I, as we've talked many times, most people think about being a doctor as about what do I do and what do I know, which is really important. You got to do the right operation, you have to know the right anatomy and all that kind of stuff. But I think one of the changes that occurred for me was I'm a little better now when I get in a tough situation, at sort of just taking a deep breath, and rather than sort of charging in there and with guns a-blazing and how do we fix this problem, and here's all the literature, and it's to just take a breath and say, I'm going to go in and have this difficult conversation with the faculty. How do I need to show up? How do I need to be right from the start? And it's a different approach. And I think that the vast majority of people that I work with sort of assume that what makes you effective in whatever your practice is, whether it's your work, Carolyn, or any of you guys, what makes people effective, most people sort of assume or believe is knowledge. Like if I want to be a great leader, I just need to read another book or take another course, or write another article or get another degree. And I am a big believer that knowledge is very, very important. But I've worked with too many people who knew a lot about a particular discipline or a particular area. And I said, this is not a guy that I'd want to follow, And then I've worked with people who didn't have much of a knowledge background, or, didn't have extensive expertise in a particular field, but they were sort of gifted in their ability to show up and listen and be present. And they were quite effective. So, that's one thing that I try to, get out there, and it is that, and this is a historical thing. Drew, you probably know it better than I, but if you look at philosophy, over back to Plato, and the sort of philosophical foundations begins with, you got your ontology at the bottom, then you could say your axiology or your values. Right there is your epistemology, and then your practice, or your praxis, praxeology, practice, and that sort of thing. Most people, they go straight to the epistemology. But you got to recognize that there's this huge ontological foundation of, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean, to be, have a certain title and position, and that sort of thing. I think that here's a way that I come at it, and you're welcome to use it, is if I were to ask you what is a hospital, you could, you'd each say something different, but it would be something like a place where people who are sick, go to get care, where there's experts in a variety of different diseases. And but if I were to ask you, a different question, not what is a hospital, but what does it mean to be a patient in the hospital? What does that mean? You really couldn't answer that question unless you were a patient in the hospital. That's the first person sort of aspect of this ontological stuff that I think is so critical. And and if you ask people, and I've done this just out of curiosity, if you ask patients, people that have been in the hospital, what is it like to be a patient in the hospital? What's it like? What they will tell you is something like, it's frightening. They'll tell you that. It's overwhelming. I don't know what the nurse is talking about. I don't know what the doctors are talking about. I don't speak that language. It can be lonely. And so then, and I've done this with some young people. If I said, of those two questions, which is the more fundamental or the more primal of those two questions, everybody gets to the point fairly quickly that, oh, it's the second question is more fundamental. What does it mean to be a patient in the hospital? The reason for that, aside from the ontological foundation piece, is that if you know what it means or what it is like to be a patient in the hospital, then you'll know how to make a hospital. And as you guys know, medicine is going through a gigantic shift on, what is a hospital? It's the huge outpatient movement, people having major surgery and going home that night. It's different. It's I remember when I was an intern, we kept patients that had gallbladder surgery in for 2 weeks. Now they go home in 6 hours. So our young people get that, and you can ask the same questions as what is a university versus what does it mean to be a student in college or in a university. And if you know what it means to be a student, that will inform you on how do you make a university with, distance learning, University of Phoenix, and, it's really been a significant change over the years. So, and the other piece of that is that we talked about earlier is, if you're interested in effectiveness, and the word, Kurt, that Warner used to use a lot was performance. Yeah, and I understand that. I think that's a good word, but at least in my circles, when people talk about performance, that they right away think about what's your margin, what's your financial upside, and that sort of thing. So I'm more interested in what does it mean to be effective with yourself and with other people.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that what shapes your effectiveness is not what you know. It's a part of it, but it's your sort of way of being and acting in the first place. And so, just to give you an example that I remember from 30, 40 years ago, there's a family in the emergency room where one of their kids was killed in a car accident. I had to talk to them, and I had a medical student with me. And medical student, I don't know, I don't think she knew much, because I think it is early in her training. She certainly didn't know anything about the stages of grieving after in death and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stuff. But there was, she was just present with this family and didn't say a thing. Because the worst thing you can say to somebody is, oh, he's in a better place now, right? Often the best thing is to just be still and to be present. And so here's a person who had no knowledge or not much experience or anything, but her way of being with the family was pretty impressive. And they in going forward, because there were other members that were in the hospital and hurt, they wanted her around, because of that. So I found that to be quite interesting. And, I think it sort of speaks to, our humanity. You want to see, I remember, Carolyn, you'll find this interesting, maybe many years ago when I was a resident, there was a bus accident, a bunch of children on a bus going to kindergarten or something that was in an accident. And it was a bad accident and a bunch of them were hurt. And in the emergency room, there were 3 fathers who happened to be sitting together because each of their kids was hurt and they weren't sure what the degree of injury or anything like that. One was a CEO, one was a janitor, and one was a welder or something like that. And boy, I tell you, those guys came together real quick, because what brings people together is suffering. And, I found that to be also, somewhat interesting. Let me stop. I've done too much chatting.
Yeah.
Well, something that I heard in there that I'm interested in is the kind of moments of resistance, because if you have if you approach or bring, if you're the one who's leading any kind of ontological inquiry, inevitably you've got to challenge the sort of dominant view that knowing is the way to be effective. And so and I'm wondering, like in that the kind of modes of resistance that occur are often, territorial, or are going to be about like this, like whatever method is already the one that I'm using is best, and how can you possibly supplant what I'm doing with whatever this thing you're doing is, in terms of, again, bringing some kind of ontological inquiry into the apparatus of the university. So I'm just curious about, because what you're saying, these are really obvious concerns that are present in most disciplines, but especially in healthcare. But how has your own efforts to share this approach played out?
Yeah. Well, I'm with Carolyn. I met a lot of resistance. The course that you mentioned, back in 2000, I guess 11 or something like that. I got a lot of pushback after the fact but it was not from the medical school. It was from other schools. I won't mention any names, but we're a medical school. We've got a business school. We've got an engineering school. Dartmouth is relatively small, but when people found out that the medical school had this 5-day course with 150 people and people from 20 different countries. Now, I know Werner was the draw, no question about it. And, it was pretty damn good, if you ask me. There were some, let me just say, I got a phone call from the provost. What are you doing? And but you see that you have to be totally in and totally on board and totally committed to a future bigger than yourself if you're going to deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, in my case, my tenure as dean, finished around 2016 or something like that. And, it was more difficult to sort of push it forward because I didn't control the resources and the space and all that kind of stuff. And, I was, what I found was, when a door closes, a window opens.
Mhm.
And as it became increasingly difficult to share this material here, for some reason, I started getting a bunch of calls from other institutions. So we did a lot of work with the AAMC, which is the national organization in DC for all the medical schools, all 150 of them. So I've been down to DC. I don't do that anymore, but I probably was down there 6 to 10 times, sort of working on doing that. There are people who are clearly interested in this material, as you know. And I would say everybody's interested, but the shell that they've erected, be it tradition or, that's not the way we do things around here. That gets in their way, and they line up very quickly with how do I get promoted, and there's very little. And Drew, I have a big issue with. I don't lose any sleep over it, but I think the way we educate our young people, and I think you guys are doing it right. Obviously, you need more than 4 people, but we basically, kids spend 4 years, spend maybe $360,000. The tuition at Columbia is now $91,000, and the whole purpose is to leave with more knowledge. I know how to do this, I know how to do that, but we don't really spend any time teaching our students what it means to become a citizen of the world.
Mhm.
Right? And I think we should be teaching them what it means to become a doctor. The knowledge will happen. I mean, they'll learn the terms and that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's a big challenge, and I meet resistance wherever I go, and I don't take it personally.
Yeah.
But you got to keep going. You got to keep doing it. And I just got back from Syracuse, giving a talk. Is actually a surgical grand rounds, believe it or not. And I taught surgical grand rounds, where I was an invited professor. Usually, if somebody comes in and I would have done this 40 years ago. You give a talk on breast cancer, you give a talk on heart failure, or you give a talk on adrenal disease or something. I don't talk about that stuff because I haven't done it for a long time, but it's not really what I'm interested in. What I talked about was how do you build a department that lasts? That was my, and I talked about all this sort of stuff in a sense that we've been talking about for the past 30 minutes, the importance of communication, listening, creative conflict, being committed to a future bigger than yourself. To me, that's huge. And in medicine right now, that's a real challenge, because everybody's living in the, there's a shortage, and I got to look after myself.
Yeah, if I could just follow on to that, because you spoke to it, but not directly. To circle back to what you said at the beginning of the conversation, you talked about how universities and or medical facilities, hospitals aren't interested in ontological inquiry, just like something they're not interested in. And I'd love to hear more about your take on why. Why is that the case? What is the lack of interest in ontological inquiry about from your perspective?
Well, I think a lot of it is that the term ontological inquiry, if you ask somebody off the street, do you believe in ontological inquiry? Or if you the term in itself is not familiar to people.
Yeah.
And so, we've not introduced this material into the into the lexicon, if you will, of our young people. I mean, our kids, I think it needs to begin in elementary school, personally. And and I don't, to my knowledge, it's not there. So when somebody gets to college and there's a course on Heidegger or whatever, it's like, I'm not interested in that. I've never heard of that. And so I think we got to get it in real early.
Yeah.
And otherwise you're way behind, right? The STEM data, and
yeah,
why
right.
STEM? Because it makes money.
Yeah, right.
Why there's why should we have an English department? It doesn't make any money. And the answer is, and I don't think people appreciate this, but if we didn't have the humanities and the kind of stuff you guys do, we'd have no foundation upon which to make wise decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're dealing with that, right now. Personally, I think that I took one philosophy course in college, and I just wasn't ready for it. I got ready for it when I was older. And so, when are you ready for it? I don't know. All of a sudden, I just was ready for it. And that's another area that I'm quite interested in, is how does awareness how do you all of a sudden become aware? And I don't think, there's anything, I'm not sure you can force it. I think when the universe is ready, you'll become aware.
Right, but and at the same time, it seems like a really important endeavor to create a space or a clearing in which awareness can arise.
Yes.
And that seems to be missing, or not something people are much interested in, creating that sort of fertile ground for awareness to arise.
Absolutely. And there's no appreciate. What do you mean space?
Three shoe rockets.
And so one of the ways that I tried to deal with that when I had positional authority and hiring capabilities and stuff is I tried to recruit the right people.
Yeah.
And I suspect, in your work as well, particularly Drew and Carolyn, in a university, there's lots of, we got to get this guy. He has grants. He's got a lot of grants.
Yeah.
So what if he abused his students? Or he's got a huge clinical practice. He bringing all this money to the hospital. So what if he yells at the nurses? And so the so what to me is huge. So I do think, the most you want to try to, if you're building an endeavor like this, you want to try to get people on board who are interested in it. And
I was going to say, there's very interesting, there's a discussion, for instance, in the leadership course at the very beginning about the crucible event, right? Which is in some ways what you're saying, when the universe is ready, meaning that in the background of my life, the world that I show up in, whatever structures are playing around in their sort of seemingly haphazard way, align in a certain way so that I might actually become aware of, oh, there's something bigger than me that I'm up to, or my life is a lie. And I haven't been doing what I really care about, and that this might happen just because it happens, and from time to time in life. But then the thing that's I think at the core of what we're focused on is like, well, how do we arrange a space consciously, intentionally, that allows someone to actually begin to confront the larger contexts and structures that are giving me my being and acting, and to begin to see, like, well, maybe there's some other possible way to be that might be, again, bigger than just my own interests in my personal well-being, and that's of course, if the structures that are already there are economically and financially and with the cultural and symbolic capital invested in them are designed to just continue to reiterate and survive. And then there's people like us that want to interfere in that some way. That's another way to look at the answering. I'm just answering Kurt's your why question a little bit.
Yeah, I
like,
I don't have a great answer for you. What I've come to, at least where I am right now, and this has been hard to do, is I don't have, a group, a small group of people like you to interact with on a regular basis. Now I've got colleagues around the country and that I can call, and my oldest is very interested in this, and he's got a PhD in philosophy, so he's kind of fun to talk to. But at least in my circles, there's not a lot of there's not very many people. And I think one thing I was thinking just in the past few minutes is I don't know if you're interested in convening a small group of people for a couple of, I'd drive to New Jersey in a heartbeat for that. Because I think that these conversations ideally are best when they're in person. This works too. And the ability to support one another is very powerful. I think it's very good, particularly when you're trying to figure things out, and boy, I'd like to get your point of view and that sort of thing. But I haven't made that happen yet. And I have a handful of friends around the country who might be interested and might be willing to come to something like that.
Maybe even a conference for the journal.
I love
Ontological
that
Inquiry in
idea.
Education.
No, I think we need to have
idea.
a conference or something like that. I really do.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a conference that has spaces that are different than just delivering information, but spaces of working together towards something, or brainstorming together, or saying, I tried this and it didn't work, and what could I have done? What did I miss? Or what other options could have been available? I've been part of a group. Well, I was part of a group like that once years ago in a project I was working with, where it was so amazing to be in a space where people, academics, or telling the truth instead of looking good. I mean, it's right. I mean, like, I totally bombed, or, and so, and this was people from four cities in the US that came together to do work in urban schools, to have that quality of conversation and to have a shared foundation would be really interesting. And yeah.
So what would be I'm just curious, since we're having this conversation, what would be the ideal sort of number of people? Like, how big would this be? Because I guess,
I haven't given that much thought, but I think it could be as small as 5 or 6, and I think once you get to 20, maybe it's but
yeah, that's good. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, something
That's
like,
what I was thinking too.
I'm all for that, because like I said, this is what I'm interested. This is what I get up every morning.
I could see a wonderful intersection of people that are in and out of academia that could also participate at different levels. And
this is the space. This is the space that we were talking about, where something can arise. So it's not
totally got it.
Prefigured talks and topics.
Absolutely.
This breakout session is going to go over X, Y, and Z. It really is more whiteboard, blank space. Inquiry.
Totally got it. And I love that stuff. The few times I've done it, you need somebody to sort of, keep people pointed in a general direction, so you don't drive off a cliff or something. But that I think is
mired in the mud.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a really great idea, Chip.
Yeah, I've got I teach a course called The Inward Journey, which is not unlike, it's the same to me. That it's all about, the only person you can work on is yourself. And the ontological inquiry for me has been where I've gotten the most traction, I think, is when I've applied it, to myself. Who am I? Who am I? And I've got, views on that. Am I an object with properties? Because that's the the sort of
prevailing
standard. If you ask people, they'll who are you, that they'll pretty much tell you, I'm an object with properties. I'm a physical body. I've got physical properties. I've got mental properties. I've got possessions. I've got titles,
stories.
Stories, all that kind of stuff.
And it goes right to something that, again, you talked about earlier. Who am I? I'm a doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a set of properties and a knowledge base.
Yeah.
Without ever examining what that actually means.
Right.
Yeah, here's my diploma from Dartmouth. I'm a doctor.
That's right. That's right. One of the things I'm exploring, and I'm trying to get the courage up to write a book, but is because I'm pretty sure I'm more than an object with properties. I have properties, but and I think we're who we are most fundamentally is something like a manifestation of being.
It's very Buddhist of you, Chip.
Being, sort of being on display. I mean, I think of you guys right now, I think each of you is a manifestation of, I'm not assigning any religious or spiritual aspect to being. Many people I work with do, and it's very powerful for them, but I don't think you need to do that. And so then, see, if you're an object with properties, the way you're going to live your life and show up each day is, I got to get more properties because this guy's going to get ahead of me.
Yeah, going to take my property.
Yeah.
Get better with the ones that I have. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think these are awesome topics to get people to come talk about. I would certainly come in a heartbeat because, like I said, most of the people most of the people I talk to are authors I read. But I've got a handful of people that are very, like you guys, they're thoughtful, they care. At the highest level, they're very concerned about the sort of where we are globally. And they recognize that we're going to need a radical shift in the way in which we see the world. And but I think it starts with you see, because I think I'd totally be interested in your views here. I think the most important determinant of your effectiveness in life is your relationship with yourself. I think that's number one. If your relationship with yourself is not healthy, it's going to make it very difficult for you to interact effectively with others and to be in your A game.
Yeah.
And a different way of saying it, Carolyn, is how do you occur for yourself?
And I totally aligned with what you're saying, Chip, in terms of in a couple of hours I'm on a book club call where we're reading a book called Hospicing Modernity. And I believe that we are literally in that process collectively without having the language to necessarily, speak it broadly. But I think we're called right now to bear witness to all the unworkability. And there's a whole lot of it everywhere, and it's not the world. It's certainly not the world that I grew up in. And it's not the world for me, it's not even the world of 10 or 20 years ago, right? It's, I just never thought that I would witness what I'm witnessing. And I think it's like, for me, it's like crisis intervention. We've got people are hungry for how do we live with all this uncertainty and all this unworkability. And college students, I had a class this semester, I was talking about something that I had experienced, and the students said, "Professor, we don't know that world. We haven't lived in that world that you're talking about." And there's a profound need, right, for people to be able to, because at the university, for example, we do graduation like climate catastrophes not happening, right? I mean, go out and do good work and make a difference in the world, and but we don't talk about the urgent existential crises that are happening right now. And so yeah, it's interesting because when I started working with ontological inquiry, I had a very different perspective, right? It was kind of like, well, this is going to help me do what I do already better. And now I think, no, it's like, it's led me into an inquiry where I see all of that so differently. But yeah, I love the idea. It seems to me that what we talked about in terms of a conference would be something that would come later after we did this first step of maybe convening a group, and then we could look at, well, what does it look like to convene that group? And then what could be done so that other groups like this could be generated, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's all good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's a project whose time has come. I mean, it's interesting because
totally agree.
I think that we were in a place where like almost going to do something like this before COVID. And I think since COVID, we've been sort of like living in this other reality. that but now so we can do a hybrid, begin convening in virtual spaces, and then with the goal to actually have an event of some sort.
Yeah.
That would be the first of maybe a yearly event.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's
so that we could build a community of people that are sort of looking at this. And again, this is the journal. The vision of the journal is to provide a space for this kind of conversation, and that's what these podcasts are for. I would think, to some degree.
yeah, no, I like this. It's very open. It's awesome.
Yeah, and to
It's
let it
very
unfold in whatever way it's going to go. But okay, all right, we'll take you up on that. Chip, thank you for
Well,
yeah.
count me in.
It's great, Chip.
Kurt, where do you live?
I live in Olympia, Washington.
Wow, you live. Woo.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful part of the country, man.
Oh, I love it.
You are
we
very
completely
fortunate.
love it here. Yep, we are. It's a spectacular place to live.
Yeah.
Good.
So I think unless there's any other questions for now, I think we can actually conclude our podcast. So,
all right. Well, thank you, and I'll do that. And if I don't hear from you, and I'll nudge you at some point.
Oh yeah, okay. No, you get me going, man. Watch out.
Yeah,
you
no,
got us
I
going
love
here,
it.
Chip. Yeah, it's great.
All right.
All right, everybody, be well.
Thank you.
Thanks. You too.
All
May
right.
the source be with you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Nice.